So, welcome everyone. Today's Wednesday, August 28th, and I have the pleasure of talking to Victor here, who's the COO and co founder of Veles Farming, one of the world's leading indoor vertical farming entities that also grows saffron. And so excited to be here with you, Victor. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind, let's start off with, just some aspects of how did you get started, your personal background, and of course, where Veles Farming is located for our viewers.
So I'll go a bit of the beginnings. So I studied business innovations in the Netherlands. I'm from Slovakia, so everything in the EU. Our business is also in the EU. And we started as a university collaboration. We had like a little minor in school for 6 months. It was called Create Your Own Startup. So this is where Veles Farming was born. In the beginning, we built a very simple indoor farm that was in a metal box that was 1 meter by 1 meter. Nothing huge, nothing complex, very simple. Just everything worked on electric timers, so no automation, no nothing. We had a great opportunity to put in a lab of agricultural school. So this is where we learned all the basics connected to growing indoors. And then during COVID, since our main business model then was growing leafy greens, microgreens, herbs for restaurants in Amsterdam, due to the COVID pandemic, everything shut down. So we also moved back to Slovakia, and we were looking for crops to grow with higher added value rather than the ones we are previously growing. So this is how we also found saffron. We went through a bunch of stuff: wasabi, gentian, blueberries, cranberries, papaya, vanilla, saffron, mushrooms, you name it. We did our research on it to see what we can do, and we settled on saffron in the end. And basically, we try to play around with the indoor cultivation process. We try to bring in elements of automatization. As we know, saffron is very labor intensive. So this is one of our challenges that we are trying to tackle as well. And also then trying to grow a more, let's say, qualitative crop in the end. Our main, let's say, target group is now pharmaceutical companies and cosmetic companies, where, let's say, the bioactive compounds that are also found in the saffron are very important. And since we do control the environment, then by precisely controlling the environment for saffron, you can then, it has effect on the bioactive compounds as well. So then we can make precise, let's say, products for our customers. So let's say if somebody wants more saffronal, then we can change it a bit, let's say with this with bit more with the drying than during the growing process. But as well, then let's say the light spectrum has an effect and other parts as well. So this is something that we do. We are based in Slovakia, so Eastern Europe, and we do our main business is then growing, let's say, saffron, and for companies here in the EU. But the aim is to scale up or move globally, but for that we are working on the automation process to finalize. The goal would be to build up a fully automated saffron farm in the end. So I'm not going to say without any human intervention, but at least on the processing side during harvest, we would like to minimize this.
Wow, that's fantastic. So thank you for that very, very comprehensive overview from where you guys started with the 1 meter by 1 meter container all the way to now. And let me know how large is your facility currently, if you have a rough estimate at Veles Farming.
So currently we have an R&D facility that's 30 meters squared of growing area, and then we have our pilot farm that's 420 meters or 400 meters squared of growing area. Per cycle, we handle around 150,000 saffron bulbs. So this is around 3 tons plus minus, depending on the size of the bulbs, but usually 3.5 around this area, because we want to get the largest bulbs possible to make it economically viable, or economically, let's say, boosted in a way, as we know that the bigger the bulb, it gets better results in a way from yield. So this is something that we try to leverage in the indoor environment.
Wow, so that's quite the nonlinear growth from 1 square meter all the way to 30 square meters for the R&D, and then even greater for the actual facility. So please tell us, like, how did you decide to, jump into saffron farming? As you said, you tested so many different crops in the indoor vertical farm, and yet you landed on saffron. And of course, as you and I know, for our viewers, though, you guys are involved in mushrooms and a couple other things. But let's focus on saffron. How did you guys make
Yeah.
that decision to jump into saffron?
I think it's based on the opportunity there is. I think for you guys, what you do at Saffrosystems as well regarding adulteration, that a lot of saffron sold on the market is fake, and there is great opportunities on certain markets to enter, as majority of the production globally comes from Iran, we know, and so there is, especially here in the EU, there is a lot of lack in transparency when the saffron is coming in. So they might let's say the problems that we try to solve is especially quality problems, cleanness of the product. All the saffron that is coming now to the EU is sprayed with chemicals, so this is something that is a big issue as well. And generally, I think how we see the evolvement around the world with climate change affecting the areas of where saffron was grown naturally before, also Iran, we see that now it's getting either more hot, or the necessary rain. I don't know how now the correct word is, but the necessary rain is getting either less or sporadic, too much, that it's too much at one time and it floods the plain. So let's say the natural zone for saffron is moving a bit more up into the mountains, and so this is pushing out farmers everywhere around the world. And we can see, I think, the general uptrend in the saffron demand is going up, especially now with the trends around the world for people looking for natural products or natural supplements to the synthetic products, especially in, let's say, healthcare, but also kitchen, but also, let's say, medicine in a way. And this is all areas where saffron can be used and leveraged due to its wonderful properties, which it has a lot. And so I think as the new segments are opening up in a way, the let's say the supply won't be able to keep up. So this is something where we saw an opportunity. I think this is opportunity for other farmers as well, which they can leverage. Of course, there are market specific opportunities. Let's say here in the EU, it's a bit different than, let's say, in the US or in Asia. But if you do some research, you will be able to see the holes in, let's say, if it's the supply side of the chain, or if it's the quality side of the chain, or just general there are mistakes in import export or stuff around it. So this is all where us as a saffron farmer can step in and fill in the holes that are in the market. So I think this is why we chose saffron as well. In a way, we came up with as we grow indoor, we can leverage the properties of indoor farming, so we can have more harvests per year. So currently we run 4 harvests per year when possible, compared to 1 that the outdoor farmer can have. So this is right away an advantage that you have compared to an outdoor farmer. Not that we want to push out the outdoor farmers. I think the market for us is a bit different. That's why we also want to focus on the pharmaceutical cosmetical, because this is where we go a bit more into the quality and the bioactive compounds. I think we can leverage the saffron up a bit more there. But generally, I would say these are the main criteria.
That's fantastic. And the last point you touched on with multiple harvests per year, we'll certainly return to that. I don't want to touch on it quite yet because it's certainly a window into a lot more of the differences and similarities, and perhaps carry over routines that can be optimized from outdoor cultivation indoors, and bidirectionally going the other way from indoor to outdoor. Before we get directly into that, it sounds like, and just for our viewers, like part of the reason that you saw this opportunity with saffron is, as Victor was describing here for our audience, there's this constant tug and pull right now with Iranian having been and still the largest world producer of saffron. That said, and according to a variety of climate change models, we understand undoubtedly that prospectively and according to real-time data and some retrospective data, that irrigation, annual rainfall in Iran is becoming less and less as other semi-arid to arid climates, and these are exactly what climate models have predicted for so long now. And it's both unfortunate, of course, because Iran has 160,000 plus farmers that produce saffron, of course, rely on saffron. And of course, there are so many other brands and intermediary trading companies. Yet it's such a beautiful opportunity for others to come in and capture some of the market share and even create, like Victor said, a little niche of where their value prop is really based in, and not therefore necessarily replacing, substituting other farmers in the industry, but rather adding to and ensuring that we can meet the supply, or excuse me, this demand that is growing in spite of limitations to supply, especially from these traditional producing regions. And full disclosure, of course, Victor and I at Veles Farming and Saffrosystems have been in partnership here, creating an excellent course, very comprehensive, as well as a book that is complementary to the course on indoor and outdoor cultivation. And we're going to be certainly specifying a lot of what Victor just said, everything from these unique opportunities from both the value prop, but also from the economics and business of rural production of saffron. And as Victor just highlighted, and I wanted to put a pin in it just for a couple minutes from now, we'll get into it. But the beautiful aspects of indoor cultivation that can be pulled out and examined for outdoor cultivation optimization, such as multiple harvests per season. Victor, would you like to add anything else as far as just this partnership that we have? Just full disclosure, of course, since we are, business partners here.
I think the way you described this was very nice as well. Maybe I will build up on it. The aim of the partnership in a way is to help also create a community around growing saffron, or just general saffron industry in a way. So you don't have to be a grower. You can be, let's say, somebody who's working with saffron as a commodity, who wants to learn more about, let's say, other properties, storing, certifications, stuff like this as well. Or if you are a grower as well, I think our aim in a way generally for the future is to create like a one-stop shop for saffron and everything related saffron, where if you want to get let's say dip your toes into the industry, you can learn a lot, especially from this, since it's a bit more comprehensive in a way that you get a lot of detailed views in areas which you might miss if you would do it on your own. So we can save you a lot of mistakes. And there is a lot of tips from, let's say, experienced growers, not only us as an indoor farm, but also from you and other growers, which were accumulated throughout the years, which we can then lay through to either through the ebook that we have, or the videos for people to watch, where then you will be able to, let's say, in a way, make larger steps in your journey connected to saffron. So again, only if you are just a fan of saffron, I think there is a lot to learn about the crop. We have a lot of let's say other sides of the book where we talk a bit about the medicinal purposes as well. I know, especially I wouldn't say more in the Eastern EU. In the Western EU, saffron is a bit more popular, especially maybe like we can say China as well, because they are big on medicinal or natural medicine. So I think there are areas of or maybe we dip our toes in all the areas of the saffron industry, and we give some insight onto there as well. And of course, then people, if they want to ask more, they can either ask through the community, or we'll held workshops or Q&A sessions for people, or then even private consulting, which we do now, where we can help to start up your saffron farm, where we can go over everything, numbers, processes, everything from A to Z. So this is something I would add.
All right, fantastic addition there. And just to conclude on that front is, Peter Drucker infamously said, the purpose of business is to create a customer. The business enterprise has only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. And as Victor just said, our approach to strategy can help save you decades worth of trial and error. But without further ado, let's dive right into some of what I think our audience here is most interested in at one level, which is the indoor saffron farming has so many differences, and yet some very unique similarities, I should say, to outdoor cultivation. But before we get into some of the specifics, can you briefly just describe some of the both hurdles and successes that you've faced so far at Veles Farming with growing saffron indoors?
I think the first, let's say, step if you are looking to grow indoors is to figure out the level of automation or, let's say, technology that you want to put in the farm. Of course, you can have a, I'm not going to say non-existent technology farm where you don't use anything. There are farms like that. I'm not saying, but for indoor farms, it's a, let's say, for measuring the temperature stuff you will need stuff, but you don't need a lot. Of course, our farm is a bit more high end, but you don't need that. You can start with basically a rack system and then go for it. So in the beginning, I would leverage something. This is also then depending on the availabilities of the, let's say, farmer. If he has space, let's say somebody will have a small storage house where he wants to start a farm. This is something what we advise beginners as well, in a way, to when you are getting in the saffron industry, is starting small. And because there is a lot of, let's say, especially with process of harvesting, there is a lot, the learning curve is a bit bigger than with the other stuff as well. Because let's say during the growing period of saffron, it's enough if you control everything precisely or in a way that is supposed to be. It's enough just to watch the saffron, check it. Let's say times you said you don't have to be constantly there watching everything working. But the main spike is also understanding the work connected, especially for harvest, as you have a lot of on outdoor saffron fields, the crop is a bit more spread out. So this is again advantage of an indoor farm, that everything is on one place. Since you control the light, you don't have to go early into the field to collect the saffron. You can collect throughout the day as well. But then understanding how the, let's say, the harvesting of the saffron, separating the stigma as well. What product are you aiming for? Are you aiming for only supernegin, or are you aiming for full pusha, let's say, in a way, where you also have the yellow part connected to the saffron. So this is something that you have to take in mind also before, because then the processes change as well. And then when you are separating only the supernegin, let's say, or focusing on the supernegin part, then also in the processes you have to be very careful where you don't leave too much of the red part on the yellow part, or you don't put the yellow part on the white part. Sorry, not the white part, the red part as well, because then this is again playing into your profits in the end. Because if you leave too much red part on the yellow, then you reduce basically the amount of supernegin that you have. So I think, and then just basically when you go over and start, just learning by doing. I think this is the best as well. Of course, we can help skip a lot of errors through our book, advice, yada yada. But I think this is something that each farmer has to go through it individually, and to see how it best works for him in a way. Because all farms, in a way, as you said, I think what you said, there are a lot of similarities between outdoor farms, indoor farms, but in a way, each of the farms is unique. There is a bunch of people who do a bunch of cool products, as we discussed. Some people grow saffron on the roofs of Paris. Some people grow it in rice fields. Some people grow it in indoor farms, which is a high-tech vertical farm like us. Some people do it in bunkers. Some people do it in metro stations. So this then also based on the farm and the setup, you have to be able to understand the processes, and then again also the connection to the market as well. Because for example, for saffron, if you want to go to the big companies, let's say the quantities are very huge, so the orders start at 100 kilos, and processing 100 kilos in an indoor farm, especially without automation, is very difficult. What we learned as well, for example, our model, what we have, wouldn't be viable in Western Europe just because of the capital expenditure on work or personnel. Because, for example, now for the 150,000 bulbs that we operate per cycle, we need around, let's say, 60 people for the harvest. So, and here in, let's say, Eastern EU, the wage is much lower than in the Western EU. So this is something to take in mind as well. So I would say, especially in the beginning, is to be able to plan out everything in a way on a small scale to see how it works, and then I would start focusing on moving to bigger farm or scaling up.
Fantastic. So much to pick apart there, Victor. Thank you for that um, beautiful introduction and some nice nuggets of specifics related to indoor cultivation and things that our growers, and whether you're just starting out or already a veteran experience in the field, so much to consider. And one thing that I really like that you pinpointed on is that uh, while there are these sort of gross, let's say, generalizations that we can make for all farms, each farm is going to have its own unique situations, and everything from the market that they decide to play in all the way to um, their availability of resources will play a difference in how they have to approach whether indoor or outdoor farming for saffron. And I just wanted to clarify one thing for our audience in case we do have some newcomers to the saffron world. When Victor here is talking about the different portions of the stigma filaments of saffron, he's talking about this whole style that has the stigma filaments all the way down to, let's say, the bottom portion, which attaches to the base of the flower, right? And so, based off of different qualitative metrics used by different markets, so there's obviously some standards in India that differ slightly from Iran, and that differs slightly from different countries in the EU. And so, while there's no 100% across the board, I would say widely accepted definition of all the different names and parts from Super Negin all the way down to Nejin, Sargal, Pushal, Bunch, Konji, or Konj, might be pronouncing that last one incorrectly. But the point here is that, just to put it simply, if you think of the base portion being slightly white, then slightly yellow, then slightly orange, then slightly red, these are the different parts of the stigma filament. And depending on how you process the flowers and cut the stigma filaments and process them, therefore, you might get a slight difference in basically how quality plays into it, and therefore how you differentiate the pricing of your saffron. So some people pay a little bit more for different parts. As far as I'm concerned, let's say from a more, that's now putting my herbal medicine hat on, of course, a lot of the stigma filaments in terms of the red portion will likely have a lot more of the crocin-based yellow pigmentation compound, which there's some really nice literature on there. And of course, in our book and course, we're going to have a whole chapter just dedicated to the materia medica of saffron, aka the herbal medicine, from all the evidence-based, let's say, peer-reviewed literature to the traditional medicine literature and everything in between. So it'd be very comprehensive and certainly help our growers and anyone who decides whether academic or non-academic come into the space and make their own plant medicine from saffron. But in that sense, let's dive in, if you don't mind, into let's start with, let's say, since you started with this earlier, the difference in lighting features between indoor and outdoor farming for saffron. Obviously, just so people know, what makes indoor vertical farming for saffron so advantageous, I mean, there's so many things about it that make it advantageous to relative to outdoor farming. But of course, one is that you can control all of these environmental factors. And we know that, especially for yield, there are tremendous effects of environmental factors on yield. And as Victor hinted at earlier, and when it comes to the quality, let's say the actual chemical constituents and their concentrations, there is literature supporting some environmental factors implication and effects on the chemical compounds. But as Victor said, the majority of the crocin, picocrocin, and saffronol in saffron, three key compounds, is mostly determined by dehydration methods and, of course, storage of the stigma filaments thereafter. But there is certainly a lot of literature that are pointing at some really nice correlations between, for example, altitude, light, and some of these chemical constituents. But before we dive into that, let's just briefly touch on some things to consider when it comes to light fixtures indoors and how that might differ and or compare similarly to some of the ones outdoors. So if you want to cover indoor, and then I'll give a brief aspect of outdoor that we can kind of compare and contrast here.
No problem. I would add one more tip as well why we chose saffron. I will connect it to the previous topic as well we discussed. Compared, let's say, to traditional crops that are grown indoor in vertical farms like lettuce, saffron is less light intensive in a way. So this was something that we had to tackle as well, because here in the EU we had the start of the war in Ukraine, so the electricity prices skyrocketed for us as well. So we had to take this in mind as well when growing as well. But as you said, like I would say the main in a way advantage, or when you are using light indoors, is that you exactly control precisely, so you don't have bad days in a way. So there is no rainy days in a way where it's cloudy and the crops don't get sun or sunlight in a way. The way you set it up, the way it works, I think the biggest hurdle to tackle here is to understand what kind of light is necessary for each, let's say, step of the cycle of the bulb. So when the bulbs are, let's say, just coming into the farm, they're still sleeping, or I forgot the word now.
Dormant.
Yeah, dormant. So they are still dormant. So then, when they are still dormant and coming out of the dormancy, not as much light is necessary than, let's say, before flowering, or especially after flowering, when the propagation is, when the leaves come out. So then, understanding how to mix light according to the stage of the development of the bulbs is something that is very key for the outdoor environment. I think this is where the advantage lies as well, because then you can, let's say, play around with it, where you provide, or the idea here, especially in the indoor environment, is to provide the best conditions possible, so the plants get what they need when they need it, in a way to boost the secondary metabolites in the plant, so then the quality of the, let's say, product is also higher. So this is the aim with the light as well. And then how the crop, let's say, moves throughout the cycles of let's say, the pre-harvest, harvest, propagation phase, then you adjust light accordingly as well. So with the most light being used during propagation, as we know, the leaves come out. This is where most of the, let's say, nutritional uptake for the next year happens as well. So this is, I would say, even the most key part of saffron farmer in a way. If you don't source the bulbs every time from farmers, you want to propagate your own bulbs or to multiply your own bulbs indoors. So this is a necessary step. You don't have to do, I think, for indoor, white light, simple white light works as well. We tried it worked for us as well. Now we work with full spectrum lights, but that's just because we do a bunch of research as well with companies on the effects of different spectrum of lights for different crops as well. Saffron likewise as well, but you don't have to go all in and buy the most expensive lighting as well. For some indoor farms, what I've seen as well, a window works as well without any light as well, and they can bring it to the point of flowering with sufficient yield as well. So I think in let's say, I'll come back. I know this will sound repetitive, but really depends on the farm as well, and the setup, and where the farm is located, as you said, like altitude, or generally other factors that are playing it, that there, which people would not maybe think of before. But I'll circle back to the, let's say, the advantage compared to outdoor is, because you control everything precisely. So when you say light, there is light. When you say this, let's say, micromoles, or however we count the light, you set it up, it shines, and you should be fine. And then just general understanding of when in the cycle, what light or how much light is needed is the general, let's say, point where everybody should start from, and then based on how their business is set up, they can change around. So I would say this is the if we speak about the light, this is the main advantage and difference compared to outdoor farmers as well, since you have full, let's say, control over conditions. So basically, the result crop is just the result of how well you manage the conditions.
That's fantastic. So amazing to see the differences and how precise you can get when it comes to controlling, like you said, these conditions in an indoor vertical farming situation. And I would like to also add that, as Victor just said, depending on the setup and, let's say, even just capitalization of the business here from the onset of starting out, right, is that you can definitely set up your system to take advantage of, as Victor just said, like a natural light from a window, all the way to, hey, if budgeting for light fixtures that are full spectrum is an issue, then at least currently you can still get some successful results from a natural white light. So certainly a lot of options to play, to play with when it comes to light fixtures. And it's interesting because as some of the literature has shown in outdoor cultivation, excuse me, we like to say that 11 hours of photo period to induce flowering is important. And obviously we don't have as much control of the lighting fixtures outdoors. But one interesting study that we actually had previously discussed at a different webinar in maybe a year or two ago is this really interesting research article that was published in the Scientific World Journal called Effect of Shade on Agromorphological Parameters and Weed Flora of Saffron, Crocus sativus, cultivation in the semi-arid zone of eastern Morocco. And what they found essentially was that 30% partial shading of natural sunlight for stigma filament yields was enhanced, whereas 50 to 70% partial shading for offspring corm yield was enhanced. So in other words, playing around with these shading variables and therefore the sunlight exposure to the plants actually can help optimize stigma filament yield, the 30% shade, or the corm yield, which was, of course, the 50-70% shading. Now, of course, that's just one study, and it's in Morocco, semi-arid climate. We don't know if that necessarily will translate to all different areas, all different farms, but it is a very interesting finding. I'm curious, Victor, if you guys have had any experimental or otherwise anecdotal even data to support any use of shading in indoor vertical farming.
I wouldn't say we looked in shading. What we researched or what we had experiments with was, let's say, reflective materials on, let's say, since electricity is expensive in some regions, you want to reduce the light as much as possible. So we are working around with, let's say, reflective materials to see if we can set it up in a way so it reflects the light, so it strips more. We didn't play around with shade, I'll be honest. Maybe something that we can look into. So from this side, this point, I cannot have, or I don't have anything to add from the shading point. But we played with the reflective material in a way. But I read the same research as well that shade. I think this is as well maybe a great, let's say, area for innovation, especially for me. I'm a big fan of agrivoltaics, and this naturally creates shades. I've seen very, very big success with blueberry farms and agrivoltaics, as blueberries do better in shaded areas. So basically they put them onto the solar panels in a way, so they're in a shaded area. So I think maybe this as well can be then used for saffron, and then you have basically a dual business model where you can grow saffron as well, but you can sell electricity, or then you use this electricity for your manufacturing. Depends on the use case. Again, it can be very broad, but this is an idea there which then can be leveraged. I think maybe if you can find somebody with the agrivoltaics farm, would be a nice use case for them to try out. Maybe we'll have some interesting results.
And just as a plug here, another great innovation would be to use the agrivoltaics to then actually grow your own saffron indoors with the solar power you produce, while also producing saffron outdoors. For all of our fans out there that are saffron crazy like us, that's perhaps something to go ahead and look into. But interestingly, in all seriousness, there is actually a farm up in Vermont in the United States here that has actually collaborated in the past with my old research institution that I was affiliated with, the North American Center for Saffron Research and Development, where my old research mentor, Arash Galagoga Bahani, would actually go out to this farm in Vermont and work with the farmer who actually had a solar setup and wanted to go into saffron production. And so they tested the effects of the shading from, of course, the solar panels, and if saffron would be viable to grow in the shade of, I should say, partial shade, since it wasn't 100% always shaded. There was obviously a portion of the day where the sunlight was, shining on the corms, and I should say the saffron plants, and they did find some interesting results. I can't remember off the top of my head the specifics, but I do recall that because it was Vermont, and they did have some issues with particularly rainy season that then turned obviously directly into the winter season. They unfortunately had some, let's say, suboptimal freezing and defrosting of the corms in the fields, which led to suboptimal results as a uncontrollable variable that certainly affect the results. But it seemed like something that, as we've been discussing, because of saffron, as Victor said earlier, its capacity to take advantage of low light conditions, it is feasible to grow under solar panels here. And so it's certainly a great option. And we'll see if we can actually get that farmer from Vermont on a future webinar as well to go ahead and discuss some of their experiences with growing saffron under solar panels. But to keep the ball rolling here, Victor, because I know our audience is just so curious about everything that you guys are doing at Veles Farming. And of course, we're not going to have enough time to talk about the whole 360 production here. So we'll certainly have to do some other webinars. And as Victor said earlier, we'll certainly be doing private workshops, with Victor and others in our private channel for the members that want to become a premium subscriber of the course that we've been working on. And we'll certainly dive into a lot of the specifics in those workshops and certainly detail everything for you all when it comes to how to choose light fixtures and control your climate, what specific systems to use, all the way to, of course, any outdoor similarities and differences. Now, one thing that I'm sure everyone is extremely interested in, and we won't get into the specifics right now, but at least we'll touch on it briefly. There's so much literature, and we know that there's undeniably a effect of temperature manipulation on everything from propagation all the way to dormancy, to signaling, to initiation, emergence. These are the different phases whereby, for people that don't know, the different phases by which the core metabolites are shifted to act differently to either produce, let's say, flower and sigma filament, or, for example, propagate corms. And so the flower initiation and the emergence phase are highly, highly dependent on temperature, according to so much literature. And as we know, that during storage of dormant corms here in the northern hemisphere, that would be during just before August, right? And so I'm curious if you have any sort of brief points that you want to highlight when it comes to how successful or how difficult it has been for Veles Farming to really pinpoint and optimize this differences in temperature gradient to optimize corm and saffron production.
I will say it in a way like this, for especially for an indoor farm, temperature is your key parameter throughout the whole growing process. Then comes the rest, the light, the humidity, nutrition. But if you had to focus on only one, it's the temperature, I would say, because as you said, I will have a little like a segue. What we will touch upon later is the multiple harvest as well. So this is playing around with the temperature is something that will unlock an indoor farm multiple harvest as well, because it has effect on the bulb as you described. But I think especially for us, when we started out, we had to ship in bulbs. So then understanding the whole, let's say, process as well, we also look into the temperature of the day where the bulbs were picked in order to understand the effects the temperature will have later on the bulbs as well. Because if it was, let's say, on a hotter day, it will have a bit of an effect on the storage of the bulb or during transport as well. And we shipped bulbs not only from here, from EU, but we shipped bulbs here to EU from the southern hemisphere as well, which was bulbs traveling by plane, where we had to arrange, let's say, climate control shipping as well. So then again, temperature is very key. Also, before let's say the corms come to the farm, if you propagate your corms, this is different, but especially when you start out, you have to buy corms from somewhere. So this is something to figure out, and then you want to basically, again, I will connect it to the cycle of the bulb, understand the temperature needs of the bulb during the, let's say, the specific cycle of the bulb. So again, then when the bulbs are dormant, the storage conditions should reflect that period. When the bulb is coming out of the dormancy, again, the temperature should reflect. So then basically, as we discussed, they are dormant during summer, so then they get activated, we call it, when let's say the temperature starts cooling down in a way. So then we focus on bringing down the temperature in a bit by bit basis. And then of course, then during flowering, it's very cold. We call it the cold shock as well. So then understanding the precise temperature range, again, I think this will be again connected to the light. I think, let's say, the general principles will repeat itself throughout all the conditions. But I will just highlight that you have to be able to understand what temperature needs to be put on when, and when you can do this, then you can basically simulate the perfect outdoor conditions that the bulb would have in an outside field, and then with this you will have wonderful results.
Fantastic. And as Victor highlighted, temperature in his experiences has been one of the most significant dials to take control of in an indoor vertical farm, and wish we could do that outdoors as well. So I think it's appropriate to dive into some level of depth here when it comes to the effects, or let's say the capacity for multiple harvests of saffron indoors relative to outdoors. So just again, for anyone who's new, saffron is a autumn blooming crocus. Because of that, we call it a shoulder crop because it's harvested after your staple crops have usually been grown, harvested outdoors, and are ready to completely just leave the field bare or plant cover crops. But instead, you could plant saffron. So as we've been discussing, saffron is generally a very low input, so therefore we call it a low input shoulder crop. And then last but not least, because of its high value, we now call it a low input shoulder cash crop. So now there have been many studies showing and attempting, especially out of one research group, Molina et al. Out in Spain, that have been some of the, not entirely, but some of the main pioneers when it comes to incubating saffron indoors, basically in this controlled chamber at a much smaller scale, perhaps more akin to Victor and Veles Farming, 1 by 1 square meter, pioneering foundation here that they begin with. And if they could control it in there and essentially make saffron stimulate, the corm stimulate, let's say, 2 periods of flower emergence, then you're able to double potentially the harvest in one growing season, which of course now you have more cash crop to sell in one season. And so as people have gained interest in indoor farming for everything beyond saffron as well, but particularly for saffron, they've really tried to hone in on how can we get multiple harvests per season. And I know, Victor, you said earlier that you guys have managed 4, if I'm not mistaken, 4 flowering blooming cycles in one season. That's amazing. So can you touch on just both some of the excitement, some of the experiences you faced with getting to that point where you could get 4 harvests in one season?
So there's been a lot of trial and error. I think, as you described very beautifully, there is some research on it, on how to, let's say, move the flowering time, but let's say done on an industrial scale or commercial big scale is a bit different than in a lab on small scale as well, because there is a lot of things that can go wrong. But generally the benefit of an indoor farm again is you control the conditions. So on the northern hemisphere, saffron flowers in autumn, but on the southern hemisphere, the saffron flowers in springs. So this is your basically two starting points which you focus on. I understand then sourcing bulbs from different hemisphere can be a bit more complex, but then again, touching up on the propagation side as well, if you can propagate indoor, then you can make these cycles work very beautifully. But the key, let's say, point is during the dormancy period. I'm not going to go a bit too much into the specifics, but it all starts during the dormancy period where you set, let's say, you get a set of bulbs which you split into two, and one you move, let's say, flowering earlier, and one you move flowering later. This is then all again connected to the temperature. So understanding how the temperature variations affect the activation of the bulb from dormancy period, and you so basically you keep one set in a dormant state a bit longer, and you wake up one set a bit shorter. Of course, this has some effect on, let's say, even the yield or the quality of the crops, as it's not the let's say the perfect time for the crop to flower. But the difference is not that much, especially if you take it in the yield boost that you will get per meter square per year if you can do multiple harvests. Even to what we suggest with beginner farmers, especially indoor, is to focus on two. Once you master two, then I suggest doing more as well, because there are other, let's say, complex things that you have to take in consideration if you're working with different sets of bulbs, I will call it, especially if you work with four, because then you need to have space, storage space for all four sets, propagation space for all sets. You have to have, let's say, equipment to manage all four sets. So it just, let's say, goes all together. But I think again, leveraging the indoor space, I think this is where the main advantage comes into this. And I know there is a bunch of companies. I'm not gonna name any names. But there are a bunch of companies trying a bunch of different things as well. So we do a bit more. Let's say some people do. What we took, let's say, inspiration of is a more of a, let's say, a hydroponic setup, where we have the bulbs in, let's say, forms or trays. But I seen some people grow saffron in pots as well. This reduces your overall yield by meter square a bit, because you cannot squeeze as many bulbs per meter square. But then again, then you don't have to do the extra work during propagation, because they're already set in substrate as well. But there's a lot of people trying a bunch of different things as well. Some of them are successful, some of them are not. But I think then again it comes just to understanding the bulbs, having good sources for bulbs as well for farmers, because then we had experience with bulbs that were infertile, or which were, for example, because saffron started, we know, in the northern hemisphere in Iran, and it made its way on the southern hemisphere, so the bulbs had to be flipped, and this, let's say, flipping takes around 2 years to complete, or for the bulbs to get fully adjusted to the new schedule as well. So it takes time to set this up as well, and there is a bunch of other stuff that has to be done outside of, let's say, just the extra harvest that you have. But I'm not gonna say it's complicated. It's just basically you are doing the same thing that you would do with the one set, but you just do it at a different time. That is it, I would say.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and of course, you know, we'll be diving so deep into these exact specific requirements for each of these, let's say, stages and conditions, both in the book, in the course, and of course in workshops in the premium course. So certainly tune back in, whether you're watching this live currently or you're watching it recorded later on. We'll be offering this course and book for the foreseeable future, and of course constantly innovating and adding it as the literature evolves, as the market evolves. And there's so many things we've yet to touch on, that we will of course touch on in this course. Of course, we just focus deeply on currently in this webinar on light fixtures and temperature control, but there's so many other aspects, from humidity to the actual nutrients that you're feeding the saffron, airflow, which would be sort of under this HVAC system. And as a funny side note, I did do an aquaponics myself here a long time ago at the Saffrosystems headquarters, and I did not have proper HVAC, and it was a disaster. And so certainly a lot of things to pick apart here, and we haven't even touched on one of the more interesting things as well, at least from my side, is the management and control of pests and how pests differ between indoor and outdoor cultivation. And so much more to touch on. And of course, I just want to be appreciative and cognizant of Victor's time here, because we're running up on our hour mark, 5 more minutes left. And I do want to touch on, funny enough, Victor, you got my whole outline of notes here, and I think we've only hit maybe half, if less than half, of the notes. So certainly we're going to have to do this again. But if you don't mind, with the last few minutes we have here, I'd love to just briefly touch on some of the business economics that you guys have faced at Veles and in Slovakia. Because when people think of saffron markets, both cultivation and selling, I don't think the first country they think of is Slovakia. So if you don't mind, can you just give us like a short overview of what is the saffron market like in Slovakia? And I know you said your target customer segment here is mostly pharmaceuticals. Is that within Slovakia or outside of Slovakia? Can you just give us a brief description of that?
So funny point, we have actually, I found this out like 3 weeks ago. We have almost 400 years of history of growing saffron in one of the regions here in Slovakia, which I didn't know, which apparently for like 300 years, from 1500s to 18, was the best saffron in EU, which I never knew. So just a fun fact. But I would say generally we focus more on the European market than on the Slovak market. Of course, there are some, especially when we entered the market through the food industry, so restaurants, gourmet restaurants, high-end restaurants, stuff like this. This was pretty easy because the restaurants are everywhere, also here in Slovakia. But if we are going into the pharmaceutical, cosmetical, more of the, let's say, the processing, and big companies are in the Western Europe. So we work on the EU basis. I think for us in EU, we have a special, let's say, market for saffron as well compared to the rest of the world. Let's say, because majority of the supply is imported, so this is one thing as well. So stuff into this, I think the best, let's say, if we speak about economics and business of the saffron farm, they have to understand the market they want to sell to. So if then again, like if you want to be B2B or B2C, this is, let's say, the first step in where you choose the direction that you go, because you can sell to restaurants as well, but then you have to take into account of, let's say, your production capacity and how much the restaurants take as well. So now currently we ramped up the capacity a lot more, and for us that's why we made the jump into the pharmaceutical cosmetic industry as well, because the restaurants, they take, let's say, around 10 grams per a month, 20 grams, 30 grams per month. And for our production, which is in kilos, over 10 kilo, it takes very long time to sell off the saffron as well. So that's why we made a step for this, where they take basically the whole production in advance as well. So then understanding where you want to sell, if you want to sell to businesses or then consumers as well, because then you have to, let's say, market or present or position your brand in a way that reflects to the customers that you are trying to reach as well. And then just understanding what all goes into I think the devil is in the details in the saffron farms in a way, because you work with very tiny, let's say, the strands of saffron are very tiny, and there is a lot of them, and each strand counts, I would say. So then of course, if you've been successful in growing, there is tackling drying, there is tackling storing, and there is then tackling the distribution of the saffron. So then it just all goes into together. But I'll circle back to understanding where you want to sell, because then this reflects as well. Because for example, for us, if we have bigger clients, they buy 5 kilos right away, we sell 5 kilos right away, and then you don't have any extra work base. So basically direct sales. But if you target more of the let's say B2B segment, then it goes more with, let's say, pushing more marketing. You have to be more active on social media, or then you have to go into certain shops or brick and mortar or stuff around this to approach these customers. So then I would just of course, then also it as a starting point, I would suggest for saffron farmers to either go to restaurants or to customers as well, because these areas have, let's say, easier entry into those segments, because either saffron is already well known, there is a lot of usage for it, and people are educated to a certain level in certain markets as well. And then once you get this in, then you will see yourself as well how the farm develops. There is going to be opportunities coming here and here out. People are going to reach out throughout, and then just trying to understand what let's say everything that goes into. I'll circle back to the let's say, I'm not going to go too much into the costs, because costs they're a bit again same but a bit different from case to case. Based on what are you using, but it just goes into understanding on basically the simple economics of the farm. So if I have this many bulbs and I need this much work for the bulbs, I will get X amount of output, and then how can I, let's say, leverage this X amount of output in saffron that I have best for my business. And then you basically set up a strategy of the way to go, and then you just follow it and see if it's successful. If not, then you can still pivot in a way to try out something new. But especially, I would say, for the best, let's say, economical separator for saffron farms is to, I would suggest, especially for saffron brands, is to differentiate themselves from the general saffron commodity market. Because here you fight with saffron that is coming from Iran, Afghanistan, Morocco, which is very cheap, and you are not going to outcompete them on price, especially in the beginning. So you have to understand factors like this, and then play into your strength. So let's say the quality, the cleanness of the product, the local availability, the sustainability part, stuff like this that you can leverage in order to attract customers in whatever area you are trying to suppose. And then just understanding this as well, and then marketing this is something which we took from Veles. So we have our friends in Japan, Akaito, saying hello to them. Which I had a discussion, especially on this topic, on let's say the differentiation of a saffron farm from the general saffron market in a way, and how this can have an effect on your business as well, because you are not growing saffron from the masses. You are growing, of course, if you scale up to sufficient size, then yes, but you are growing, let's say, saffron for a specific, I'm not going to say purpose, but you have your, let's say, story, and you have to sell this story, and this will all play into the economics as well, and understanding. So it just all comes down to understanding the business. I think this is where the partnership which we have together is very beautiful, because we can give people insights in either market, also the growing side, where they can skip a lot of research up in advance, and have a much clearer picture of how they need to start to become a successful farm.
Excellent. Yeah, and again, Victor, you've given us such a wealth of information there that is both actionable and incredibly informative for, again, the spectrum of growers from just starting out to well experienced and versed in the cultivation. And as Victor said, we certainly will be diving deep into the economics and marketing of saffron specifically in both the course and book. So please, whether you're watching live currently or watching this recording, give us a shout out if you're interested. Check us out on both our websites, and we'll certainly be looking to provide you with the best resources out there on saffron cultivation, all the way to everything aspects of business and marketing. So certainly going to be a fun journey together, Victor. Now, if you don't mind, can you just leave us with, where can our viewers and audience here find Veles Farming? What are the most appropriate channels you think are amenable?
So of course you have our website, velesfarming.com, where you have all the information about us, our products, what we do, where we are located, and then either social media. So we are the most active on of LinkedIn, but we do some Instagram as well, where we show, let's say, even behind the scenes or the everyday, let's say, journey of a saffron farmer, which is going on. So this is the best. Or then, if people want to chat, they can reach me personally. They can either write me on LinkedIn or through my email. So it's victor.kulchar@velesfarming.com, which I'm very happy to reply to some people. I like this a lot. This is why, let's say, we want to leverage the community aspect as well, because we work with a lot of outdoor farmers as well, for us to learn from them. So I think the bigger the community, the more knowledge can be shared, and the larger the, let's say, the network effect of the saffron knowledge can be, and the better we will be. I think there is a lot of beauty or a unique blend. What we have here is a combination of indoor and outdoor as well. So as I think what you described in the beginning very beautifully, there is a lot of takeaways from indoor side which you can take into the outdoor side, and vice versa. So something that we want to leverage as well.
Excellent. Well, Victor, much obliged for your time. I know everyone here, on behalf of myself, the Saffrosystems community, and beyond, we are all so appreciative of your time, your feedback, and your expertise here in the field. So looking forward to doing it again sometime. And again, please check us out. Check out Victor, Veles Farming, at all the different addresses and URL, social media accounts that he mentioned. And we'll certainly be putting links to all these accounts as well in the comment section when we release this video to the community. So again, can't thank you enough, Victor, for your time, and looking forward to all the future opportunities we have together.
Likewise, and looking forward to the near future, what will come out.
Excellent. Take care, my friend.
Yep. Bye-bye.